Whatcha lads, welcome to Oak Swamp and the build of my Austin 10 Special. Here it is over here. I've took all the body off and we're down to a bare chassis. And it's a pretty little chassis, it's in really good nick. Even though it looks really rusty, it's actually really solid. And I'm loving them lightning holes, they look really cool. I intend to use all of this, the springs, the axles, the steering, everything. And it's got cable brakes, which still work after all this time, surprisingly enough. So I'm going to use them, and that will add to the thrill of driving with small horsepower. Now, talking of horsepower, this is the original engine, and it's a wheezy 20 horsepower, and it's very heavy, and the gearbox is notchy. So we're having this Reliant 850cc, all aluminium, 40 horsepower out the box, and they're very light, 53 kilos with the gearbox. Now onto the chassis. This chassis is 13.5 inches off the ground, which is ridiculously high. It's like a four-wheel drive. So it's my intention to lower this by about 7 inches. 7 inches. How am I going to do that? I'll show you. So here we go. I've chopped the front off, I've chopped the back off, and I've moved the back axle and the front axle forward by about 2 foot. This has enabled me to bring this chassis down 7 inches. Now you can see the chassis is pretty much level with the axle. It will be by the time it's mounted. Now to spring this, I'm going to be using quarter ellipticals. So I've cut down the original front springs, and they look like so, and they look pretty good. Now when these springs go on, you've got a big piece missing here. If I was to raise this up, this would sit nice and flat, but it wouldn't be very low. So I chopped this piece off of one of the horns that were originally on the front, and it sits nicely into this curve. So here's the idea. Obviously these are just temped up. Next job, get choppy with this axle. Well, that looks better. Now I've got to make some brackets to come up here to connect to the top leaf spring and the lower joint. Probably do something like this, and this curl around here, and then the bottom link curl off the bottom. I knocked up this template, and this is going to go like that, and then that's in there, if you get my gist. So there it is. Now all I've got to do is bend this around here. Hope I've done that in the right place. So I've clamped the side I've bent underneath. I've got the exact distance. Well, that's not too bad. Straighten it up a bit. That looks pretty good. So there it is in its raw state, but it's kind of there. Yeah, that gives you the kind of the idea of what it's going to do. A lot of grinding later, and we're starting to get there. So Paul's over and he's going to drill some lightning holes in my front axle.
It's all marked out, just got a centre pot.
Now what Paul's going to use here is a mag drill to make short work of this. What size holes are we going for?
On gap is 17.5.
Yeah, that should fill the hole up, shouldn't it? I did want to weigh the axle actually, beforehand, but I haven't got any scales. We're going to have to weigh the swarf.
Yeah, okay.
So if you don't know about mag drills, basically it connects to the bench magnetically. Yeah, it's solid on there. We've levelled the axle, and now we'll drill some holes and they're going to look cool. Come over here. Lovely old Paul. Hole number 2. I've got Paul over doing the holes because I'm absolutely useless at drilling them. All my drills are all blunt, and I always drill them in the wrong place. It's just something I can't do. This is an expensive thing that didn't work.
Only because it's a rubbish old axle.
Did you hear that, Austin 10 community? You called this axle rubbish. We'll be having none of that round here. The turn of speed that this thing will have, because it's got those holes.
Yeah, but the problem you've got, which you're not taking into account,
is
you could have me in it.
we're going to need to drill some more holes. Last hole.
Job.
There we go. Awesome. So, 10 holes. How much do you reckon that's actually saved us in weight?
I reckon about 450, 500 grams.
500 grams. That's going to make this thing fly. Oh, how sexy do they look though? Do you know what time it is?
Kebab time!
So here we go. I'll set it up there with the grill end to give you a better idea. The thing about drilling holes, it screams out something race or hot rod, I don't know, but it certainly looks cool. So next job to do is these bottom links and to mount the shock absorbers, but you're gonna have to wait till next time. So don't forget, you gotta subscribe and do something with a bell, right? And then you'll get me next week. I knew this bloke, right, and he had a massive head, right? It was huge. It was about the size of a transit, right? And we used to go on holiday in his head, right? We used to go away for weeks, and you could look out of his ears and his eyes. It was lovely. Out of a shit in his mouth. It was great. Anyway, to spring this, I decided